Number 10. Deadly Genesis. We can talk about different X-Men and mutant teams here, but I'd also like to touch on some of the rosters as well that you may have forgotten about. This one might be due to selective memory loss, or it could just be because you haven't read the story yet. We are talking here about the X-Men Deadly Genesis limited series, which revealed the next team sent into Krakoa after the X-Men team we know went missing. This team wasn't necessarily a bad one at all. In fact, all of these mutants are kinda super powerful, but they were all basically introduced in this short series, which didn't really help to make us care as much about them as we could have. All in all, this story just had a very early 2000s feel to it. Not that that's a bad thing. The Deadly Genesis X-Men team were a group of kids that Moira McTaggart was trying to help out. She didn't even really see them as students, and then Charles recruited them and turned them into X-Men. The team consisted of Sway, Petra, Vulcan, and Darwin, who have all recently reappeared in the Dawn of X line, in case you were wondering where they made their first appearance. Number 9. XAVIER'S Security Enforcers. One that we might forget about every now and then is the mutant team that Bishop originally belonged to from the alternate dystopian future that he hails from. I believe this Earth is 1191, but I could be mistaken on that. Didn't even write down my Earth number. Bothers me. This mutant team is known as the XSE, which stands for XAVIER'S Security Enforcers. If you know Bishop well and you're a big fan, you likely know this team well, but for those who are new to the character, you might not know about this group of enforcers. The point of the team that Bishop was part of was to preserve the long-dead Professor Charles Xavier's dream, where mutants and humans could exist in harmony, living peacefully together. Bishop has even been known to wield specific future equipment, which he got from XSE, although we haven't seen them in a while. All members of the team wear their mutant tattoo brands like a badge of honor, and the members have included Randall, Malcolm, and Bishop's sister Shard, among others over the years. Before we hop into our number 8 spot, I just want to thank all of you for being here and give you a quick reminder to click that like if you are enjoying this video. It really does help us out. Number 8. Nasty Boys. You might remember the original villainous Marauders team, but do you remember Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys? Don't worry if you have, because I will never let you forget. While both the Marauders and Nasty Boys teams are villainous teams, I couldn't have an obscure mutant team list and not seize the opportunity to remind you all of the Nasty Boys. So here we are. I also just love this name for the team. I personally always read Mr. Sinister with like the most outlandish, flamboyant, yet manipulative pseudo-English accent. So for me, it's very fitting that he decided to name his team this. Nasty Boys, so perfect. It fits perfectly with the voice that I have for him in my mind. The Nasty Boys were the team that came after the Marauders. Instead of Gambit being involved in the team, Multiple Man was the generally heroic mutant who got involved. Originally, the team saw Ruckus as leader, with Slab, Gorgeous George, Ramrod, and Hairbag making up the roster. Gorgeous George even resurfaced in Dawn of X more recently. Yay! I might be the only one, but I'm still kinda hoping that the Nasty Boys as well will make a return. Bring them back. Bring them back. Number 7. OUTBACK. When it comes to X-Men rosters as teams, one of the best but shortest running roster is the OUTBACK team. This era for the X-Men team lasted less than 25 issues, but was still so good that people still talk about it today. Now, if you missed this one and you've never heard of it, it's one that you actually probably should read. Not one of my silly points, more one of my serious and beloved forgotten teams on this list. The team started off in issue 229 of Uncanny X-Men, with Storm, Wolverine, Rogue, Colossus, Dazzler, Longshot, Havoc, and Psylocke on it. We'd also see Jubilee introduced during this roster's time together. The OUTBACK team is noted as being one of the best rosters for the X-Men when it comes to having a group who truly feel like outsiders. Also, you get to enjoy the Inferno story in this run, which is bizarre and magical, so you're welcome for that. Number 6. X-Corps. No, I'm not talking about the X Corporation, which has yet to come out but is still coming our way. Thank goodness. I thought that book was going to be firmly cancelled, but fortunately it has been revived. I'm so ready for X Corporation, let's go. When we talk about X-Corps, we are talking about Banshee's team. He formed this team after Generation X disbanded, and most of the team were composed of that era of mutants. This team was made up of former villains turned heroes and was created to act as a police force basically for the mutant community. Joining Banshee were the Blob, Avalanche, Fever Pitch, Jubilee, Husk, and M, aka Monet. The X-Men team actually did not approve of this team's creation and actually attempted to get Banshee to disband it. In the end, Mystique infiltrated the team and liberated its members, especially the villains, who were Number 5. X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, North Star, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4. Generation Hope. This one is from the 2010 series Generation Hope and was under Cyclops' banner ultimately following the events of her genesis. Though the team itself was led by mutant messiah Hope Summers, and its roster consisted of No Girl, Pixie, Primal, Sebastian Shaw, Transonic, Velocidad, and Zero at that time. Though originally Hope's team started pre-Regenesis as just being 5 mutants including Hope herself, with Velocidad, Oya, Primal, and Transonic on the team. The team was a search and rescue group who were brought together as they were acknowledged as being 4 of the 5 lights on Cerebra. Hope basically triggered the rebirth of the mutant gene, activating these mutants. The 5th light was what they sought and kind of why they came together, heading to Tokyo, Japan. Zero was the mutant they sought, who would eventually join the team, although originally would be antagonist. Number 3. X-People. You probably forgot about this team just because their name is, well, super forgettable, but they are actually from a very memorable alternate universe, the MC2, or also known as Alternate Earth 982. This Earth is the home of the beloved Mayday Parker, aka Spider-Girl, now known as Spider-Woman. But you know what's not so memorable from that universe? Their version of the X-Men. I mean, I get that X-People is meant to be gender neutral, more inclusive, but is that really the best name they could come up with? There has to be something that isn't X-Men that is better than that. I mean, I know there is because we have dozens of other X teams with the letter X in them that are way more catchy than X-People. Because of the Earth it is set in, X-People is a team of originally younger mutants who are now older and taking on the role of leaders, mentors, and teachers. Actually, here Jubilee is the team leader, with her core team roster including Simeon, Angry Eagle, Torque, and Spanner. Number 2. Factor 3. Factor 3? That sounds like some kind of toothpaste. This is another villainous team composed of mutants but led by an alien known as Mutant Master. You might not remember it because it was only around for a few issues and also first appeared way early on in X-Men issue 28 back in 1967. This team popped up a few times and would often force mutants into doing their bidding, often mind-controlling Banshee to attempt to kidnap or help kidnap Professor X. What a wacky time it was. Fortunately, in issue 39, Factor 3 was defeated for good and hasn't bothered the X-Men since. So we haven't seen them for a really long time. Number 1. Lightning Force. This X-Men team comes to us admittedly from an alternate reality, which might be why you've never heard of it before. But once you learn about them, you'll likely wish they had remained forgotten. Lightning Force is an X-Men team that we come across in the Exiles, who themselves belong to Earth 597. They are basically the alternate Excalibur team from their reality, a reality where the Axis won World War II. I think you know where we're going with this. Their roster is almost as surprising as the whole idea for this team. We have Herr Xavier, who helped to create the team through experimenting on them. Yikes. And leading the team we have Hauptmann England, aka Captain Britain, with Magon, aka Gloriana, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawler. Also, if you were wondering, yes, Kitty Pryde is still Jewish in this reality, which yeah, makes her character's history here pretty dark. Number 10. All-Female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1 as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 9. Chuck Austen's Uncanny X-Men. At least, I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austen's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austen's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the Neopham, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 8. Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. Boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7. Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a teenage mutant team. Every time I say teenage mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a teenage mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6. X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back, so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X Corp in the past has been a non-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still still very much a go. Number 5. Sword Bearers of ARAKKO. I mean, when you consider the Sword Bearers of ARAKKO, we're all pretty much kicking the champions of Krakoa's butts, kinda have to put them high up on this list, right? Well, the Araki are newer when it comes to the mutant status quo and what we consider to be, you know, an X-team, considering we kinda just met them, and they are loosely tied to the X-Men through both their connection to Apocalypse and, you know, being mutants. At the end of the day, they are still mutants, and for that reason, I think we can include them on this list, because this list for me is really more about mutant teams. That's what it's really about, more than, you know, specifically X-Men sister teams or X-Men rosters, which we could do, but I don't know. I feel like to me that's a different list. We just use the name X-Men here because it makes more sense in relation to Marvel Mutants and is more appealing than if, you know, we just put Marvel Mutants in the title of this video. You dig me? The Sword Bearers of ARAKKO didn't just best their Krakoan competitors in contests of combat and wit, but also in some of the more charismatic and just straight up strange contests. Also beating them in a dancing competition, a runway model one or like a fashion show contest, and a scavenger hunt, to name a few of those seen in X-Force issue number 14 of that 2019 series during the 10 of Swords event. Oh man, I love 10 of Swords. Number 4. The UPSTARTS. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the UPSTARTS. The UPSTARTS were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The UPSTARTS were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's a lie. Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Raze has a tendency to steal the show, plus my girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. X-TREME Sanctions Executive, the other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSE that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. But I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible. Number 10. X-Force. X-Force is known for being one of the most ruthless mutant and X-Men related teams in the comics. It was initially more Cable's team and was used like a sort of time police force to remove threats to the timeline. However, as time went on, the name became repurposed and is now more associated with someone like Wolverine, known for being a sort of mutant black ops team, usually that he leads. Currently, Krakoa is equivalent to America's CIA, and in fact very currently, as of right now in 2022 at the time of this recording, the team is more Hank McCoy, Beast's team, which has recently moved out of the shadows, with Beast deciding to no longer basically hide all the morally questionable, super shady decisions that he's been making to eliminate threats and keep Krakoa safe. Although sometimes it seems like his true aim may actually be something more sinister, because it is an interesting way of trying to keep people safe. And friends, before I move on to my next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love the X-Men, then we have a playlist for you. It's our X-Men playlist. Go check it out and you can watch all the X-Men content that we've done. Done a lot. Number 9. Brotherhood of ARAKKO. There have been a couple of X-Men Red teams over the years in Marvel Comics, but for the purpose of this list, we're focused on Storm's Brotherhood that she brought together during her time as ruling regent out on planet ARAKKO, formerly known as Mars before the mutants terraformed it and claimed it for themselves and their people. They appear mainly in the book X-Men Red, which is why I'm referring to them as kind of like X-Men Red, though really the title for this book is a bit of a misnomer when it comes to Storm's team. Well, you could call Storm's Brotherhood this book's main team, and thus X-Men Red because that's the name of the series. It seems initially this was more in reference to the team Abigail Brand tried to put together, but kind of failed to really have takeoff, with Storm's team taking prominence instead. The team initially consisted of Storm, Magneto, the Fisher King, and Sunspot, but now that Magneto is gone, also includes Cora the Burning Heart and Wrongslide. Also includes Cora of the Burning Heart and Wrongslide, a resurrected Rockslide who came back different after he was killed in Otherworld. Number 8. Avengers Unity Division. The Avengers Unity Division is basically a combination of X-Men and Avengers, which makes it pretty OP. At least it was a combination of both these teams when it first started. The team was created by Captain America as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. After the fallout, Cap felt pretty bad about basically not really helping the mutants more in regards to promoting them towards humanity, and making sure that the world over did not really hate and fear mutants. At least, he felt as responsible as he, as one man, could do. But he's a pretty influential guy, so he was like, maybe I should have been helping you guys more. In an effort to do this now, he decided to bring together Avengers and X-Men to work together, creating the Avengers Unity Division. Later on, Inhumans would even be added into the mix as well, so really this team is all about bringing people from different worlds who maybe don't always see eye to eye together, which is a really beautiful sentiment when you think of it. On the initial team, which was known editorially as Uncanny Avengers, we had Captain America leading and joined by Havoc, Thor, Rogue, Scarlet Witch, and Wolverine. Rogue and Scarlet Witch were an especially challenging combination of characters to have on this team, as Rogue vehemently hated Wanda for what she had done to mutants during House of M, and saw her basically as a villain. In fact, most mutants did at that time, so this was in general a powerful team on paper, but one that also came with a lot of issues and a lot of baggage, to be honest. Of course, that's what makes it so interesting to read, right? We're here for the drama. Number 7. Great Ring of ARAKKO. The Great Ring of ARAKKO is exclusively made up of Omega level mutants, which really tells you how much of a powerhouse team they would be. They are the ruling body of ARAKKO, which is the sister mutant island nation to Krakoa. In fact, ARAKKO and Krakoa are kind of like less siblings and more romantically tied. Ooh, romantic islands that are in love with each other. Both are sentient mutant islands, and for a long time they were actually attached to one another, literally and romantically, and were also in love with each other. Although now, they actually prefer to be separate. They've been separate for a long time and they're like, you know what? The spark, it's gone. ARAKKO's ruling government has 4 distinct sections which govern different parts of their civilization, with some areas having more power at given times. For example, in war times, Dawn is the area that typically gets more say, as this is the area that Dawn rules over and governs. The war times. For years, the Iraqi were at war with Amenth, so this would have been a very prominent section for many years in the past in terms of their ruling body. And it's something that the mutants of ARAKKO struggle with releasing themselves from, the obligation to always be on guard and kinda always be at war with people. While Uranos recently cleaned the clock of the Great Ring of ARAKKO, that should not undermine their strength, as Uranos is basically on a whole other level by himself as one of the most powerful, ruthless, and I would say evil Eternals that we've ever seen. And I know people would probably like put the X-Men above the Eternals or mutants above Eternals, but let me tell you, the Eternals are still pretty powerful, so we gotta respect. Number 6. Versus Inhumans Unity Team. Inhumans versus X-Men was an interesting time, to say the least. We basically had to come up with a reason for these two groups to fight one another, which we did by making the mutants deathly allergic to Terrigen mists, which had actually been released around the world, which ended up killing, a lot of mutants. As a result, Emma Frost made a martyr out of Cyclops, using him to propel forward her own plot to eliminate the threat of the Inhumans. She ended up being one of the main leaders of this team, which was sort of a unity squad, bringing together all mutant-related X-teams, primarily Magneto's X-Men, an X-Men team with past versions of the characters, and a more current X-Men team, in addition to some other mutants who have served on X-Men teams before. Number 5. Extreme X-Men. This X-Men roster marked the return of Chris Claremont to the X-Men in a full-time capacity. Extreme X-Men Volume 1 is a series that started in 2001 and ran till 2004. It was a team that featured my girl Rogue as the leader, woohoo, which I'm all about. The original Extreme X-Men roster also featured Beast, Psylocke, Bishop, Storm, Sage, and Thunderbird on the team. Lifeguard, Gambit, and Slipstream were also added to the mix throughout. This team was originally brought together to find Destiny's premonition-filled diaries, but of course along the way was distracted by many other imminent threats. As you do when you're on an X team. Number 4. The Five. The Five have to be one of my favorite teams to this day. They also in essence stand to represent this current era of X-Men, which seems sadly finally be coming to a close. Oh no, I'm going to be so sad to see it end. I'm not ready to say goodbye. I'm gonna need a box of tissues whenever if we do a video about that. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be crying the whole time. The Five are iconic in this way because they represent the power mutant kind now holds. The power over life and death. Mutants can resurrect other mutants, and not just that, they can resurrect other people as well, as it turns out, non-mutant people. So they don't just decide who lives and dies in regards to other mutants, but can also pass this judgment on to all the people of Earth. The Five are the team that allows this to happen. They're led by Hope Summers, and the roster includes Egg, Proteus, Tempest, and Elixir. Together, these 5 teammates can resurrect mutants by creating eggs and imbuing those eggs with life, growing clones of mutants who have died, and using their powers to not just recreate them physically, but also to recreate them on a genetic level, giving them back their powers and even modifying them to be as they were in real life. For example, Wolverine having his adamantium-coated skeleton, which is not part of his powers, but something he got later in life, they can do that and also give him those sweet adamantium claws. In addition, the Five also use backups Professor X keeps on Cerebro for all mutants to restore their memories as well, so that they are in essence the same person who died recently. Although the question of what this means for their soul is still something that I think we're considering, and I wonder if that will have repercussions after we end this era. Who hasn't died? That's gonna be the real question. Who hasn't died yet? We should do a list on that. Number 3. Extinction. The Extinction team truly is a scary one. They were around at a time when the Phoenix Force was believed to be returning to Earth. It was thought that the Phoenix Force wanted to merge with mutant messiah Hope Summers and have her act as its host. While the X-Men were more optimistic about the Phoenix's return, the Avengers were not so optimistic. As a result, the mutants deployed their own team to fight against the Avengers, but which was initially also created to defend the mutant island of Utopia and, honestly, the world against extinction level threats. Hence the name, the Extinction Team, you know what I mean? The Extinction team included Cyclops, Magneto, Namor, Storm, Dagger, Magic, Hope Summers, Emma Frost, and Colossus. Talk about a powerhouse lineup. Never mind the Phoenix Force, this team in and of itself seems frightening enough to justify the Avengers' concern, assuming they don't trust the mutants having power, which, while at times both teams have been allied, has always seemed to remain a bit of a touchy subject to the Avengers, who have a history of not playing well with other major superhero teams in the Marvel Universe, to be honest. In fact, they also even have a history of not playing well with each other within their own team. So yeah, me just throwing shade at the Avengers. Number 2. The Phoenix Five. 5 seems to be a magic number when it comes to the mutants. While the Five, as they are simply known, are all about life and resurrection, the Phoenix Five have the potential to just straight up destroy worlds. Or I suppose they could also save them, if they can avoid being corrupted by the Phoenix's power, that is. The Phoenix Five are what some members of the Extinction team become after the Phoenix Force arrives on Earth. During a fight with the Avengers, the Phoenix Force is split into 5 pieces when Iron Man attempts to destroy it. These pieces end up merging with 5 hosts, creating the team we know as the Phoenix Five. Of the Extinction team, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magik, and Colossus are the ones who end up as the Phoenix's hosts, dividing the team. While initially the members of the Phoenix Five attempt to use their newfound power for good, they all end up kinda getting corrupted, with other members also stealing their power until it is all combined into one host, ending with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. We all know how that went. Professor X ended up as a dead guy. Number 1. X-Men. Obviously, one of the best and most powerful around has to be the X-Men. I mean, come on. Of course I'm gonna pick the X-Men. I mean, is it too obvious? I don't know, but it's true. And I would say we've actually had one of the best X-Men rosters in recent years, with the previous roster that included Jean Grey, Cyclops, Synch, Lara Kinney's Wolverine, Rogue, Polaris, and Sunfire. While the team has had many different rosters throughout the years that have been standout, Jerry Dugan's team was pretty stacked, especially when you consider you have 2 people that can use other people's powers, one of whom can sync with anyone else on the team. And the current team as well is also fairly stacked, especially with Bobby returning to the main X-Men team and him being a pretty unstoppable force as an Omega level mutant. I mean, honestly, I think Iceman, if he was just a team, he could be a one-man team. That's how powerful he is. If we also considered amassing all the X-Men that had ever served to make one giant super team, then the X-Men would also definitely be the most powerful, as they've had so many members rotate on and off the team throughout the years. Even the team from the classic era, still being younger too, at the time that is, they're not as young now, were pretty powerful. And then of course there were the 80s and the 90s for X-Men, which also saw a lot of really powerful lineups, to be honest, with Kitty Pryde, Logan's Wolverine, Rogue, Havoc, Polaris, and even powerhouses like Magneto and Rachel Summers joining the team. Rachel Summers herself could also be a one-woman team.